All right, turning back to the main topic now. We're discussing the whole matter of elections. As I said, we have the man of the moment. We heard earlier about the man of the year. This now is the man of the moment, Mr. Orette Fisher, who is the director of elections, and also in studio, Miss Denise Alain, who is a first-year student at the Norman Manley Law School. She hails from St. Kitts and Nevis. So, Mr. Director, welcome again. Thank you for joining me on Balancing Justice. And I should say, listeners, when I extended this invitation to the director, he did not hesitate, and I'm glad that he made himself available. What is more, you will get the opportunity to ask him any questions that you have in perhaps another 20 minutes or so. But I'm going to start the ball rolling. And Mr. Director, the number one question I think on everybody's mind at this stage in Jamaica is your office, the Electoral Office of Jamaica, currently prepared to hold general elections?
As we speak, at this moment, the answer would be no. My answer is we are in the process of getting ready.
What does it take for you to get ready? You need money. That's the first thing.
Absolutely.
How you got 200 million recently from the Ministry of Finance, with promises of getting another 150 million this week.
Yes.
Have you got the second 150 million?
No, but I was in touch with the Ministry of Finance today, who confirmed that the money will be disbursed this week.
Okay, so today is Tuesday, 3 days for disbursement. All right, so if it is that you get the money, the 150 million, by Friday, does that satisfy your budgetary requirements?
In terms of preparations, yes.
Okay. What does this money go towards?
Well, we have a number of things that needs to be done, because one would have to understand the fact that after general election is held, say in 2007, or even the local government election,
right,
the office is not funded for the holding of elections between that 4 to 5 year period.
They forget about you.
No, we are given money for
yes,
general administrative expenses,
yes,
and for registration of voters.
Yes.
For the by-elections, we are given the exact fund to conduct those by-elections.
Okay.
So there are a number of things that you would have used in the elections that you would need to replace. The equipment also would naturally be, in some cases, obsolete.
Yes.
And some place in another case, just unreliable by that time.
Say, is it that you get a whole new different set of ballot boxes and everything all over?
No, we use the same ballot boxes, but
so you have enough ballot boxes?
Absolutely.
7,000.
Yeah, but things like the printing equipment, and we do a significant amount of printing.
Yes.
We need equipment for the electronic voter identification and ballot issuing system.
Right.
We need money to prepare for the training. That's the training material.
For the election day workers.
Yes.
Yes.
So
how many workers you hope to have?
In the polling station, we'll be looking at 21,000. And when you put in other workers like the polling station security assistants, formerly called the one-day police, we're looking at pretty close to 30,000 persons, including reserves.
Yes.
So that's a significant number of persons. And we also train the representatives for the political parties so that they are aware of what is expected inside the polling station.
So the training has started already?
Yes, it has. We completed the training of the trainers, because you have to have a cascading method. So we have completed the training of the trainers, and we started training the workers during this week, from weekend coming into this week.
All right. So when you get this, so to hold the elections, 350 million is sufficient for you to be able to
prepare.
To prepare you.
Yes.
To prepare you for it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, in terms of holding the actual elections, is it that you're going to need more funds after this?
A significant amount more.
What kind of money are we talking about? I saw a figure published
between 1.3 to 1.5 billion dollars.
Exactly. That's what I saw.
Just bearing in mind that is the 2007 elections cost 1.3 billion dollars.
Right. And you're earmarking now 2 billion.
1.3 to 1.5.
Yeah, for this election.
Yes.
All right. So you're going to need some more money dispersed in short order.
No, after the money for preparation is separate. Most of the money would be expended after the election itself in terms of payments for rental of equipment and so on, and to pay the 30,000 persons. Yes. They are not paid until after the election.
Yes.
So a lot of the money will be paid out afterwards. There's some you need before any announcement for the basic preparations. Then there's some that is spent between nomination and election day. Yes. A lot to do with printing and distribution of the supplies and so on.
Yes.
And then payments actually take place now after the election has been conducted.
Okay, so the critical sum of money we're talking for the purposes of the staging of elections is in fact the what you're waiting on now.
Yes.
The 150 million.
Yes.
Alright, now let's assume you get the 150 million by Friday of this week. Because we all know in Jamaica there is sometimes many are slip between the cup and the lip. Mm-hmm. But let's assume you actually get this money in hand on Friday. Mm-hmm. I gather that equipment has already been ordered. So it's not that you're starting the orders when you get the money. Equipment is on its way.
The equipment has been ordered, yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. When do you anticipate receipt of this equipment?
Well, we're given a delivery time of between we got the money on the 19th, the initial tranche.
Yes.
The 19th of October.
Right.
And we were able to place the order because we had prepared the order for an eventuality. Because what you have to understand is that once you get to the last year in the life of an administration,
yes,
then we are cognizant of the fact that elections will be held within a 12-month period.
Right.
So we would initiate certain preparations, but there are some things that we must have money in order to do. We got the money, we were able to place the order on the 20th, and we were given a deadline of mid-November.
Mid-November?
Yes.
For the equipment to be received by you?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, as I said, assuming you get your money by Friday, this other tranche of 150 million, how soon after that would it take for your office to be able to answer the question that I asked first about being prepared to hold the elections?
I would definitely not be able to give you a time frame.
Or a minimum time frame. In other words, it's going to take you minimum 1 week to get up to speed, 2 weeks, a month.
No, but you're assuming that the equipment is the only thing that would determine that, and that is definitely
no,
not so.
I'm not assuming anything. I'm just asking.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We have not completed the recruitment.
Yes.
And the training is going to be dependent on the number of persons who would have worked before as opposed to new workers. It takes 5 sessions to train a new worker, while it takes 3. So at this point in time, I am not in a position to say what that mix is going to be.
Yes.
And that would also impact on the time when the electoral office could say that we are in a position to conduct. So I would prefer at this point in time not to give any time frame, because once you speak to a time frame, the media, the public, and the political representatives are going to hold you to that time frame, despite the fact that it is your best estimate.
Yes. So you don't wish to give a best estimate to
I don't.
To guide the listeners, though?
No, I don't.
No. You stayed out of that frame.
I'll be held to that time frame.
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, there you have it, listeners. Because it is a question I think that everybody has. Is it that when you are ready, the public will be officially notified by the Electoral Commission?
Well, what I do, I give the Commission a weekly update.
Yes.
Because I would have listed the things that we need to do prior to nomination day and the things that would be required between nomination and election day and post election day. And I give them weekly update on the first of the 3 sections. The period between leading up to nomination day. So I advise the commission, which, as you know, includes representatives from both the opposition and the government. So persons will be aware as to exactly where we are on those critical items.
Okay. All right. And in terms now, another question that we have, and many people have been a little concerned about, there's this position that some people are raising, rather than have 2 elections separate, where you have general elections on one occasion and local government elections, which were constitutionally due in December last year, and so we're out of time for that. Some people have been suggesting that we should just roll them into one, have both local government elections and general elections on the same day. A mammoth undertaking. What is your response to that?
It is not something that is beyond the Jamaican electoral process system to conduct both elections at the same time. However, it is not something that you can just up and do. It would require some amount of planning, some amount of looking into, because, for example, presently, the time between nomination day and election day, the minimum time is 16 days, the maximum is 23. Just conducting one election, we usually go pretty close to that cutoff point, that deadline. Now, if you're going to conduct both, it's not that you're going to run one seamless election. You'll be doing 2 separate elections, even though they'll be on the same day. And they are conducted under 2 different pieces of legislation. So there are a number of things that would be duplicated. And that therefore would maybe require some look at that time frame. So maybe the 16 to 23 days would not be enough to print 2 sets of ballots, several sets of lists, when you have the 228 local government elections to conduct along with the 63 parliamentary elections, because you treat candidates. All right, you have to look at individual candidates and what the law requires that you do for each candidate. So that is one area. We would also need to retrain the trainers so that they in turn can train the workers, because we may need to look at the procedures and the number of persons. We may need 2 poll clerks instead of 1 to write up the separate poll books, one for the local government election
and one for the general election.
And there's also some amount of public education campaign that would be required, irrespective of what other persons might think. So it is something that would take a little planning. But it is something that would save the country some money, and it is something that I personally think we can look towards in the future. But if an election is to be called in the short term, all right, between now and I would say 6-8 months, I don't think it is something, because we'd also require a full set of ballot boxes to place the ballots for the other election. And presently we only have enough for 1 set.
So again, so your preference is then for us to have just 1 election at a time, not to roll them into.
I'm saying going forward, it is something that I definitely think would save a lot of money, and something that
this time round, you are not minded.
Unless all the things would be taken into consideration, including whether there would be time to maybe move. And this is just my thinking. Move from 16 to 23, maybe to 25 to 30 days.
All right. Okay. Another question for you, sir. Now, in terms of the timing, because that's another issue. People have been coming up with all kinds of dates where people talking about the election. I don't know how they claim to do, because it's just the Prime Minister, I understand, that sets the date. But many people say, it's going to be on December 8th. Some people say it's going to be before Christmas, the week before Christmas. It's going to be in Christmas. It's going to be in January. Some said the latest February. They are sure it's March. But tell us, what is it that the law prescribes in terms of the timing of the elections between when the Prime Minister announces the date and the actual holding of the elections? What's the minimum time for that?
Okay, between announcement and nomination day, there has to be a minimum of 5 clear days. There's no maximum. So an election could be announced now for some time next year.
Yes, but I remember minimum 1980 comes to mind when Mike and Manley announced it, I think 9 months or 10 months ahead of time. That has never been done again. But yeah, so minimum 5 clear days.
Right.
Explain clear days for the purposes of the listeners for us.
Well, as you know, I'm not a legal person, but my reading of the Interpretations Act indicate that clear days you would exclude Sundays and public holidays.
Yes. Okay, so Saturdays would be reckoned.
Yes.
Okay. And so it's a minimum of 5 days between announcement and nomination day.
Clear days, right?
Right, 5 clear days. And then in terms of the time between nomination and election,
it's a minimum of 16 days and a maximum of 23. And these are just days, not clear days.
Okay. All right. So tell us about how that relates now to the list. Because one of the issues that people seem to be having is on which list it is that the elections will be called.
Let me put it this way. There's always a list in place.
Always.
So the current list is the May 31st voters list. May 31st, 2011. We publish 2 lists per year. The other list is due for publication on the 30th of November, 2011. The law requires that a list be at least 5 days old.
Yes.
At nomination day. And we're speaking again about clear days.
Yes.
So at least 5 clear days.
All right.
So the call would definitely be for the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
If when he announces the election, the November list is not, the list due in November.
On the 30th of November,
right,
it's not yet 5 days old.
Right. Then clearly that would be indicating that it's the May list.
Yes.
If those conditions are satisfied, then the November list would be in place.
Yes.
So it would all depend on the timing of the announcement by the Prime Minister.
All right. So there you have it, listeners. It is something. So those people who were rushing to be enumerated up to the last week in September.
Right.
Those are persons who would make their way onto this November list.
Right.
Okay. So if it is that the Prime Minister makes his announcement anywhere up to the 5th of December, then it would mean those persons would not be counted. They would not be taken into account.
Once the election is called on the May 31st voters list,
right,
those persons would not be a part of the...
well, that's what I'm saying. Right. I put it another way.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, there you have it, listeners. I just want to remind you, in the studios, I have the Director of Elections, Mr. Orette Fisher, and we are discussing the whole matter of election laws and some of the questions, the burning questions that people have been asking, on what list the elections will be called, what is the timing of the announcement versus when nomination day will take place, and when we ultimately go to the polls, and of course the state of readiness of the Electoral Office of Jamaica. There are certain people who don't have a vote in the elections. I won't say they have been disenfranchised, but they just don't have a vote. And you are one of those people, Mr. Fisher.
Yes, the Director of Elections is one such person.
Yes. Who else?
The independent members of the ECJ.
Yes.
There are 4 independent members.
Yes.
Who are also not allowed to vote.
Yes, I know Professor Miller.
Yes, Professor
Miller. Chairman.
Yes.
Yes.
We have Justice Clarence Walker.
Yes.
Mrs. Pellin McClarty.
Yes.
And Dr. Herbert Thompson.
Yes, so those persons have no vote.
Right.
At all.
So we would join persons who are certified as insane, as well as persons who are convicted.
We're not making any comparison there, but
those are the persons who will not be eligible
as well as who? You said insane and the
prisoners.
And prisoners.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
All right. So those persons have no vote, listeners. And of course we can understand the rationale in terms of people like Mr. Fisher not being able to cast a vote. We want a system that is completely independent and transparent and having the appearance of being free from any influence or bias whatsoever. All right, so you can feel comfortable that the election process is something that can withstand scrutiny. All right, let me bring in Miss Elaine here now, who is from St. Kitts and Nevis. Perhaps you can just tell us a little bit by way of background as we make this comparison, Denise, in terms of your homeland. What is the size of your population? You know, Jamaica is close to 3 million. But what is the size of St. Kitts and Nevis's population?
Oh, good evening, listeners.
Yes.
Yes, now, St. Kitts and Nevis is probably a municipality in Jamaica. It's it's round about 50,000 grand total.
Yes.
For the two islands.
And how many people you have in your parliament?
11. The national parliament has 11 members.
Yes.
And Nevis has an island assembly that has 5 members.
Yes. Do you find that elections, I mean, this is your first time to Jamaica? You're here as a student?
Yes.
Okay. But you I'm sure, being a member of our region here, the CARICOM region, you certainly have been made aware of the importance, the prominence that elections takes
Absolutely.
in the Jamaican context.
Yes.
How is it in St. Kitts and Nevis?
At least equal, if not greater prominence.
Yes.
The political affiliation, the political issue is front and center. I think in St. Kitts and Nevis we have politicking the full 5 years.
Yes.
Not just during the time of election.
Yes.
And I don't know if being such a tiny society militates against taking a break from the politicking, but it's extremely serious. People are fanatically attached to their political parties.
And they're into colours and all of that, the slogans.
Absolutely.
So they have the same kind of campaigning and the big advertisements, the billboards, the concerts, the dances, the T-shirts, all
elections are an event unto themselves. Our last general election, the campaigning was nearly 18 months.
Yes.
And we had some really amazing departures from the norm, in the sense that people learned for the first time that the life of a parliament is not from election to election.
Yes.
That's what people thought.
Yes.
Because that's the practice.
Yes.
But then we learned that the life of a parliament is from the swearing in of the parliament until that anniversary.
Yes.
So our last federal election was in January of 2010. But the parliament was prorogued a day before it constitutionally dissolved on its own.
Yes.
Because, the prime minister wasn't ready, so the anniversary of the election came and went, and people were in an uproar.
Yes.
And then he pulled out, the constitution, the fine print says it's from the time parliament is sworn in.
That's right.
So the election was in October, parliament was sworn in December. And so the parliament was due to be prorogued on the 14th of December, and the 13th of December is when he officially dissolved it, a few hours before it would have dissolved on its own.
Yes.
And dissolved it without setting a date, which is another thing people didn't realize could happen.
Yes.
And so that caused a bit of consternation as well. But then he didn't set a date until January. And so that's when he learned that there's 90 days from the prorogation of parliament that you can call an election.
Yes.
So all of these things, we did not have this sort of process where people discussed exactly what happens with regards to the election beforehand. What we discussed a lot was overseas votes. So we have a system where if you're on the voters list and you migrate permanently abroad, you can still vote.
I see.
Now, it is controversial.
But you can't do it remotely. You have to come.
No, you have to return.
Yes.
So what happens is that, say I'm going to study and an election is due, I register to vote because somebody's going to pay for my ticket to come home.
I see.
So if I can't come home any other time, if I can't afford it,
Yes.
That
the
is
party that has an interest is going to ensure that you make your way home.
So that is it.
Probably first class.
No, obviously.
So that you can come
obviously, that's problematic in that people who are, as I said, permanently migrated.
Yes.
I mean, so you have people who haven't been back, who went to England with the Windrush and they came back to vote 50 years later. Nonsense like that, which I think is nonsense. Can happen. And so because of that, because if you're entitled to citizenship if you're a parent or grandparent of some certain kids.
Yes.
So there's a potential voters list that is many times the size of the population that's resident there.
Yes.
So because of that, there is quite a bit of tension in terms of how exactly can you police a list when people who you have no way of vetting can show up on the list.
Yes.
So the discussion about how you can fix that, because that isn't difficult to fix, but who's going to do it? I mean, the government has no interest in closing those kinds of loopholes, and so there's a bit of a stalemate.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the whole issue of elections is not just a problem in St. Kitts and Nevis, but the Eastern Caribbean. Antigua had a scandalous election most recently.
Yes.
Dominica had, there's a petition there as well. So throughout, there's something seems to be in the air, in the water, where elections are concerned.
All right, thank you very much for that, Denise Alain. Reminding you listeners, we're looking at the whole matter of elections. And my special guest this evening is Mr. Orette Fisher. He's the Director of Elections. The numbers are 926-7615, 926-8631, 926-2178, or 1-888-991-2080. If you want to send us a text, you may send that to 285-4757. That's 285-4RJR. Back to you now, Mr. Director, if I may. This matter of the dual citizenship, it created quite a bit of stir on the last occasion. In fact, I discussed it on this very program weeks before the elections. Some lawyers came on, it was downplayed, and then lo and behold, it became a central theme, I believe, one of the central themes throughout the entire administration of the government. And on both sides, both parties had challenges that they had to face. Can you say now, as far as you are concerned, whether or not this whole matter has been resolved? The question has been resolved as dual citizenship, in the sense that what steps does your office plan to take, if any, when candidates put up themselves for nomination?
Well, what I'm about to say might add to the controversy, because as far as my office is concerned,
yes,
I am governed primarily by the Representation of the People Act.
Right. And
we have no idea who will turn up to be nominated on nomination day.
Right.
It is traditional for parties to name candidates.
Right.
But as far as the electoral office is concerned, no one is a candidate until you are nominated.
Right.
And anybody who meets certain criteria can turn up and be nominated. And what the ROPA says is that, which is the Representation of the People Act,
yes,
is that once the person turns up during the period between 10 o'clock and 2 p.m., they pay the $3,000 which is required, and they are nominated by 10 qualified electors.
Yes.
Then that person is nominated. That person's eligibility to sit in Parliament is a totally different issue.
Yes.
And not something that the electoral office would be able to adjudicate. And persons tend to latch on to the issue of dual citizenship, but there are a number of other things that would bar persons from sitting in Parliament, yes, which include persons who have been declared bankrupt,
yes,
people who are under sentence of death, insane, I think he's a judge of the Supreme Court, and so on. So there are a number of other things, but the dual citizenship seems to be the most popular. And yes, these are in section 40, subsection 2A, I think, of the Constitution.
Right.
So those are constitutional issues, yes, which, if I'm a returning officer sitting and awaiting persons to come in, if you walk in meeting the three criteria, the time, the money, and the number of electors from the constituency, there's absolutely no way I'll be able to determine any of those listed in the Constitution.
Yes.
And for me to declare that you are ineligible, if later on the court should rule that you are eligible, where would that leave me?
That would expose you. But let me ask you a question. Let's assume John Brown, to pull a name out of the air, was someone who it is notorious within the context of Jamaica had been in breach of this particular provision in relation to the Constitution. So it rendered them ineligible to hold a seat in our parliament. And let's just assume it's on the basis of dual citizenship. So we know that. And John Brown is now put forward by members of the constituency on a particular day, at a particular time. And is it that you're saying that the returning officer in a situation like that, where this is notorious that John Brown was one of those persons who was held in the last election to have breached our rules and our constitution by virtue of being a dual citizen? Is it that you're saying that there would be no onus on the returning officer to make some general inquiries? Let me see that you have renounced, or establish to me that you don't have any links now to that other country that you were reputed, that it was notorious in the public domain that you had this dual citizenship. You're saying there's no...
Presently, there's no such requirement.
Yes.
And we did not ask that of any of the candidates who renounced.
Yes.
And rerun in the
yes, in
by
elections.
No,
yes.
we did not, because there's no requirement in the law presently for us to ask that question.
So it's going to, you see, we're in a very interesting state of affairs, because what you can then have happening is that somebody who is able to have access to the media and to be able to, put on the public relations campaign that is necessary, can speak about renouncing, when in fact there may be no renouncing taking place.
Well,
but you are saying that the law doesn't give you that prerogative.
No.
That is something the courts deal with.
Right.
You just look at, but there is on the nomination form some requirement for candidates to make some acknowledgement that they don't breach any of those provisions in Section 40.
Presently, no.
Shouldn't there be?
I would be speaking from a personal position.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
And personally, I think that is something that should be considered when
Yes.
persons are asked to so indicate.
Yes.
And then if found in breach at a later point in time, then that could be held against them.
Yes.
But presently, there is no such requirement.
Because surely if I'm going to nominate Heather Grant, Brown Sugar Grant, I should be able to say, well, I know Heather Grant, and I, RJR, am able to certify to the best of my knowledge, information, and belief that Heather Grant is not a bankrupt, that she is not insane, that she doesn't hold any citizenship other than Jamaican citizenship, etc., etc. And, put myself in that way so that you have something to act on.
Yeah, but that would require legislative change.
Yes. All right, well, we're going to see how this one pans out, listeners. So I guess it's going to boil. I mean, my honest hope, my fervent hope, Mr. Director, is that we don't go back into a situation where people are now taking us back through the courts, because that would be such a waste of time and a waste of the country's resources. We have been down this road. I'm going to appeal to all of these persons who are running that they just declare their hands and they speak truth. All right, now in terms of the identification, because some people want to know that when they turn up on election day they won't have any problems and so on. First of all, how may one check if they are currently registered to vote?
Okay, you have a number of opportunity. You can visit the EOJ website, ecj.com.jm, to check. You can call the helpline.
So when I go to ecj.com.jm, they just put in their name and it comes up what? What do they do when they go to the website?
think there may have been some adjustment, but it's not just the name. I think you may need your elector registration number.
Okay. All right, which might be hard to find. Yes. How else can they check? You said the helpline?
Yes, 188-991-8683. Or just call the regular numbers 922-0425-9, and there are persons who will be able to check.
Can you just repeat the first number for me?
1-888-991-8683.
Okay. Or 922-0425-9.
Right.
Okay.
Or persons who know their constituency office can go to the constituency office and they'll also advise you.
Yes. All right. And then on the actual day now, when voting takes place, what kind of ID is acceptable?
Well, the only ID acceptable would be your voter's ID or no ID at all. We don't
you don't demand any
other ID. If you have your voter's ID, what it does, it makes it a lot easier for you, because we can verify your identity a lot quicker and much more easily. If you don't have your voter's ID, then the process takes a little longer in terms of...
Yeah, it's a series of questions, right? You know, that only the person would know.
But without your ID, that wouldn't prevent you from voting. If you don't have the ID, it would not prevent you from voting.
All right. I have a quick question here coming from a listener. They say, what is the qualification of the post of director? They're asking about your post. Yeah, qualification. You know, is what qualifies you to hold the post of director of elections?
Well, I suppose in terms of the Constitution, you are required to, or the law, you are required to meet the criteria that I had mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Being a Jamaican citizen, not having sworn allegiance to
any.
Right.
Yes.
And they obviously not being a bankrupt under the sentence of those things that would pertain to any parliamentarian that would also obtain.
Right.
If you are talking about educational qualifications, then the commission is what would determine that, because I suppose you would be required to have, and this is just my estimate, maybe a first, second degree, but that is something that the commission would determine.
Commission would deal with that.
Right? Yes. But you don't necessarily have to have prior experience. I was in the electoral office for 15 years.
Yes.
Prior to being appointed.
Yes.
However, the former director, when he came in, he did not have any electoral experience.
Yes.
So that is not necessarily a requirement to have worked in the system before.
Yes. All right. And so you have the qualifications and the experience. Right. Another one says, good night, Mr. Fisher. Why do persons who work in the election in West Portland, why won't they be working this time? I guess
why won't they be working?
Why do persons who worked, I guess, in the last election in West Portland, why won't they be working this time? This person is making an assumption. I don't know if that's true.
Well, I have heard rumors that the persons who worked in the last election will not be allowed to work. From my position, Andrew, my position is that when we conducted the by-elections, we realized that a number of the persons who worked were in fact very political, right? Were very political. And so what we are saying is that we'll be taking a closer look at the applicants. We have issued no such directive that they will not be allowed to work. We'll be taking a closer look at the applicants.
I see.
To ensure that they are neutral.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you very much for that, Mr. Director. Just reminding you, listeners, it's Mr. Orette Fisher. He's the Director of Elections. And I also have Miss Denise Allain, who is a first-year student from Norman Manley Law School. The numbers, the helpline for the Electoral Office of Jamaica, if you want more information, are you on the voters list, etc., etc., and some of the issues that we are discussing here this evening, you can call 1-888-991-8683, or the general numbers are 922-0425-9. The email address is ecj.com.jm, the website ecj.com.jm. and you can get more information about that and whether or not it is that you are on the voters list.